Hello, welcome to 1874, the podcast. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by the Athletics master of all trades at the moment, Greg Evans. I'm fresh, but I say fresh, I'm not fresh at all. I've just got back from Sky. Greg, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Daniel. How are you?
Good. Yeah, as you know, very tired. 3 a.m. alarm this morning. You can probably tell by my face I've seen better days, but I'm sure I'll perk up as I speak to you, Greg, about what's going on at Aston Villa Football Club. Of course, the US tour has come to an end now. Relatively successful, I would say. I watched the game last night against Brentford. Thought it was a useful exercise. I think we're now starting to see Unai Emery's team kind of take shape, and there's definitely some interesting facets to it that we watched in the game last night. I'm assuming you've watched, Greg, but I don't actually know before I've asked you that question.
I don't watch friendlies. Are you mad?
No friendlies? No, not having it. What was the golf on us, I assume?
On. No, I've watched a bit. I haven't watched the full games. I obviously wasn't in the States. But yeah, friendlies don't bother me too much. I think that Villa have you're starting to see some good patterns of play now. No need to get a new striker when they've got Ezri Konsa scoring goals like that.
What a goal.
What a goal, by the way.
I wish you'd saved that for in the normal season. Let's not do that now, Ezra. Let's do that in the first game. It
almost gets lost a bit, doesn't it? But fantastic goal, fair play to him. But no, I think, look, you know, I've seen obviously some of the footage from the games, watched bits back, and looked at various areas that obviously writing stuff around. And I think, starting to see some positive signs. I actually think Villa are in a really good place, certainly compared to the rest of the Premier League, because there are a lot of clubs that have still got issues. Villa are pretty much sorted, aren't they?
Yeah, it feels pretty set, doesn't it? Like I say, you're kind of getting an idea now of what kind of flavour Unai Emery's going to go for with his team selection. I thought Moussa Diaby looked very, very good last night. I think he's going to be a real step up in quality for Villa's forward play. And I have to say, yet again, I think John McGinn is the first name on the t-shirt, the team sheet even. I think I've got him on the back of my away shirt that's coming actually, but I've got to say, he was phenomenal yesterday, especially in the first 45. Just everything good that Villa did kind of went through Mcginn and Diaby, and I thought that link up was really encouraging.
Yeah, I just we've talked about McGinn so many times, haven't we, for so many years now, and I think it's just great that he's still a big part of this team, and Villa have got that continuity because he's only him and Mings now that are in the squad from the promotion winning team. I think that's good. I think that Villa fans can obviously relate to him. He sort of understands the club fully now, and just passes on that message to some of the new arrivals. And his performances aren't, they're not sort of dropping off, are they?
They're getting better.
Getting better, if anything. And he's just becoming more versatile, I think, as the years go by. So many different positions that he can play in, and so many different areas that he seems to perform well in. Emery, loves him. We know that from the very first conversation that Emery had with him. It's quite funny, actually, when you think back to that first conversation. John McGinn wasn't playing at the time.
No.
Aaron Danks and Neil Cutler had dropped him, assuming that he was the problem in that Villa midfield. And looking back, it probably wasn't that, was it? It was probably a little bit more. It wasn't an individual thing. Emery's first conversation with McGinn was, "Where's your favourite position?" And he said, "Well, on the pitch, please." And he's pretty much been on that pitch ever since for him. And yeah, it's a good sign that McGinn's playing well, but I think the team in general are really gelling and looking like a strong outfit.
Yeah, I think you could literally drop him in any of the front six positions and he'll give you a really good performance at the moment. I mean, he's pretty much done that, actually, since Unai Emery's come into the club. I think McGinn must have played in every one of those front six positions, actually, in his time since Emery's come. And, yeah, just really, really encouraged by what I'm saying. When your longest-serving player and now captain is still the first name on your team sheet, some would say that shows stagnation, but actually it just shows what a coach Unai Emery is, because like you've said, he wasn't anywhere near hitting the heights that he's hitting Unai Emery's time. And he was just he was so good. Everything went through him, and it was a really encouraging performance. What did you make of Villa's back line? Pau Torres lined up a left back, but we know the way Emery plays, it's usually with the left back gets the licence to bomb on. Yesterday, it was Matt Cash who had the licence to bomb on and popped up with a goal in the first half to put Villa 3-2 up. So Pau Torres was kind of playing as the left back that tucks in and makes a back three. You haven't seen the whole game, but what did you make of him? It's very early days, but I've got to say, I didn't think he looked fully comfortable in that role. But teething problems, it is early days.
No, the same. I shared the same opinion on as you on that. Yeah, I mean, look, Emery's tried to sort of put three centre backs in the back four positions, hasn't he, during these friendly games in America? And I'm not sure. I hope he's not trying to force it too much. I'm certainly not getting too carried away with the team selection in pre-season games because they mean nothing. You know, they are literally about building passages of play. Learning how to play together, experimenting, and obviously more importantly, getting fit and match sharp for the season. So I'm not going to talk too much on that, but I just hope it doesn't get to a point where Villa have got four really good centre backs and they're just trying to squeeze three of them in every week. I wouldn't like to see that. I think Villa did a lot right last year, and Emery certainly did in the formations that he picked. He picked the right players in the right positions. You know, left back at left back, or right back, etc. Didn't mess about with it too much, and I thought that really helped the balance of the team. Okay, Villa have got a minor issue at left back because Alex Moreno isn't fit at the moment, but I would prefer to see Luca Dean in there and have a bit more balance to it rather than having three centre backs in there. Okay, there might be some games in the season where it lends itself to a three at the back formation for a specific game. And yeah, you know, as I say, I'm not getting too carried away because it was just a friendly game. But for me, I think Villa play better, as you've seen the back end of last season when they have a flat back four.
Yeah, I mean, pre-season is the time to experiment with these things. Unai Emery may well have come away from that game thinking, "I won't do that again,"
Yeah.
or he may have seen some things that he liked. I guess that early on in the season, the left hand side is not going to be a problem, but Moreno's not going to be there. Jacob Ramsey's not going to be there. So the emergence of Philogene on the left hand side, we had a big conversation about him on last week's podcast. I think he was the only player to start, or certainly the only out. I think he was the only player actually to start every single game in the series. You would say at the moment, Emery's still been a little bit coy about it, but you would say that is a pretty big signal that he's part of the plan, certainly in the first half of the season.
I think it's looking that way, isn't it? It's looking like he's going to be a part of it. Whether he's going to be a starter or not, we'll wait and see. Obviously, Leon Bailey, make of him what you want. Obviously, the support, the Villa fan base are very mixed and split on him. But he had obviously some extra time at the Gold Cup, so he returned back late to pre-season. I presume that's why Philogene was playing a little bit more. We'll know a bit more from the next two friendlies, won't we? That's Lazio and Valencia. You know, certainly Valencia will be the one where Emery will try and put together his strongest squad ahead of the opening game against Newcastle. Whether that will include Bailey or Philogene, we'll wait and see. But I think, yeah, he's going to get some minutes for sure. Because there are plenty of games, aren't there? You know, Villa want to go deep in all competitions, so they're going to need lots of players.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on him at the start, but Diaby, he really did look a step up. He looked so good. I think he's going to be one of the most exciting signings that Villa have had for many a year. I think we said last week, year upon year, that kind of wide/forward player has gone up in quality from what Villa started with when they came in the Premier League. And he just looks electric. He looks like he's got so much to his game. Again, it's early days. He may well struggle at times in the Premier League, getting used to it. He'll probably have good games. He'll probably have bad games. But he certainly has a lot to his game.
Definitely. Look, it's a really exciting signing. You know, we touched on it last week. Villa have gone from El Ghazi to Trezeguet to Traore to Bailey to now Moussa Diaby. And they've paid a little bit more each time, or significantly more in this last acquisition, and hopefully he can kick on and be a really important part of Villa's forward line. Do feel like that sort of position needed strengthening. Feel like Watkins is going to, he's durable. He's going to get you lots of goals. He's going to work hard. No need to swap him. The midfield for me is pretty much settled now, even with Ramsey injured, and defence Villa looking quite strong as well with the new addition. So, I just feel like that area is going to be an area where Villa really needed to exploit and get better, and I think they will. Great for Diaby to get a couple of goals so early on. You want that almost. You want your forwards to just score as quickly as possible because it just gives them a bit more confidence and momentum going into the season. The fact that he hasn't even been to Bodymoor Heath until today or tomorrow is pretty incredible, really, and he's still scored a couple of goals for the club. So let's hope the next few weeks he will get used to his new surroundings a bit more. He's obviously made new friends in the team already, building connections, as you say, with McGinn. We saw that on the pitch, the way they linked up well. And it will now be down to the player care team really to have, make sure he settles into Birmingham, gets everything he needs, gets looked after, and just takes away all the worries so that when he goes on the pitch, he's ready to perform.
I mean, Derby, I think, will come straight into the team, but the other two, Tillemans and Pau Torres, I actually don't think they'll start the first game of the Premier League season. I think Tillemans has got to break up a very good partnership in Louise and Kamara. I think they've earned the right to start that first game. And in fairness, I still think Conser and Mings have earned the right to carry on from the back end of last season as well. Villa kept so many clean sheets. So actually, they're in the position where Tillemans has played in the Premier League before, of course, but actually they can take it slowly with those two and probably introduce them in the first European game, I would think.
Yeah, it sounds like a wise move to me. I think Villa finished the season really well with Mings and Konza in centre half. Okay, they've conceded quite a few goals in pre-season.
Do you think that means anything? With the high line seem to get exploited quite a lot.
I don't. I mean, I really, genuinely don't pay too much attention to these friendly games. It's that they are just, games to get the players ready. There's so many changes in the games. It affects momentum. When 7 or 8 players come on in the second half. The one thing I would say is that, playing against good quality opposition like Villa have, and, teams are going to be coming up against in the Premier League this season is a bit of a bonus because it takes away the element of not really caring because there is a bit of pride there. They want to go and win and, they're not holding back in challenges. You've seen in some of the other games as well in that Premier League summer series. There were some challenges going in for sure. I watched Chelsea versus Fulham.
I watched the first half of
that. After the Villa yesterday, was it? I can't even remember. Was that yesterday or Saturday?
It was yesterday.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't Saturday for you.
Every weekend. And I was watching Chelsea and I kind of just thought, you know what, like they've got a lot of issues here, Chelsea as well. And Villa just looks so sort of ready and set up. Okay, they were, conceding a few too many goals and maybe not quite as fully at it as they hoped they'd be. But Chelsea just seem like they've got so much still to do. Fulham have got the Mitrovic issue that maybe might not quite get resolved until the end of the season, plus injuries. And you just go through the league. I mean, take away the top 2 teams, Man City and Arsenal.
Well, you say that, Greg. I've got to say, Man City have got work to do. I'm obviously doing the transfer shows at Sky. Man City have lost players, but haven't bought anyone in. And I would say they're short, Man City.
Yeah, I mean, they probably do need to bring in some additions, but they've got rid of 3 of their oldest players, which at some point they're going to have to do anyway. So we might be talking in next 12 months and be thinking, do you know what? It was actually a good move.
I'm sure what they do will be right.
And, they all seem to do it. We thought at the start Zinchenko and Jesus letting the 2 of them go was possibly the wrong move and it was strengthening Arsenal. And yeah, it might have strengthened Arsenal, but in the end, it worked out well for City because the players that they had at the team went and got them the treble. And look, teams are in transition. You need to move players on. And if you're getting decent money back for some of your older players, I think these top clubs are having to do it now more and more. Look at Liverpool. They needed a midfielder before they sold Henderson and Fabinho, who is on the move as well. Chelsea, who we've already mentioned. Tottenham have got the Harry Kane issue. Brighton and Brentford have signed 6 players each, but are they any stronger? I don't think so. Only time will tell. I just feel like it's slightly falling into place for Villa because they've done very well in the market. I remember the last time I got a little bit too carried away saying that they won the transfer market was that time when they signed Coutinho and Chambers and Digne in the January.
Don't forget Robin Olsen.
And Robin Olsen, yeah. And it didn't kick on for them, unfortunately. So I'm trying not to get too carried away, but I just think they've done some decent business. They've built from a really strong platform and strengthened, which is going to help them, I think.
Well, you're saying that on Sky this morning, the question that got asked to a lot of the people watching was who's had the best window so far, and the same 3 teams kept coming up. It was Manchester United, Arsenal, and Villa.
And Newcastle have done well.
But I don't think they're really strong. They've got Tonali. I keep struggling with his name. Tonali. They've got Tonali in. Harvey Barnes has replaced at maximum, but really, they're about to embark on Champions League season, and I don't think their numbers wise they're much stronger. Tonali will really help because he's a high level player, but they've got positions they still need to fill. They need another centre back, possibly another full back as well. Newcastle, like you said, I think Villa could start the season with the squad that they've got now, and if the transfer window shut tomorrow, I'll be pretty happy with what Villa's squad and what they've got. I think there's the makeup there of a good squad. I think once Manchester United get Højlund in, I think Man U, Arsenal, and Villa can probably say they've had the best window so far. I would say because they're building in the right way. All three teams as well, building slowly, not adding like 5, 6, 7 players. When you've done well and you've had a solid season and you're building something, which I think all those three teams I've just mentioned are, the way to improve is to probably buy 3, 4 max into your team, but they have to be players that really improve your squad. I think all of those teams, you could say they brought in players who are of a high level and certainly don't weaken the squad.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, United need to get their striker, don't they? If they can get that sorted, they're looking good again.
That's coming. That's happening, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a lot of money for potential, isn't it? I feel like Villa have Tielemans on a free, no-brainer. Pau Torres has played a lot of European football, high-level football. He came in for 20 million less than his release clause. I think it was, or somewhere around that number. And Diaby, I think, prove a bargain in times potentially. A French international. We all know the French international set of the players they can choose from is absolutely ridiculous. And this guy was called up to the World Cup squad. I just think they've brought in high-level players and players that are of at least equal quality of the players that are already there, and a couple of them I think will be real upgrades. So, I'm really happy with the business so far. As I say, if the window shut tomorrow, I think Villa can be very happy with what they've done.
Yeah, and I think one of the main things was to build a squad that was ready for Europe, and clearly the players that Villa have bought, Diaby, Tielemans, and Torres, are all used to that routine of playing the Sunday, Thursday, or Champions League as well as Torres has. So they've looked at that as well. They've looked at it and thought, can we get 3 or 4 players in that can come in and strengthen our team straight away? I think Diaby definitely strengthens them. I think Torres is equal to what they've already got. Tielemans is equal as well. But the benefit of having those 2 players in is when one of your midfielders or defenders isn't available, you can bring a like-for-like player in and you don't lose any quality. So it's just strengthening the squad and being prepared for the extra games. But I do think Villa are in a good position. To go back to Newcastle, I suppose, very briefly, I think Tonali's an improvement on perhaps Sean Longstaff. You're probably looking at he will take his role, and they're doing it slowly but steadily. And each player, you just think every player they get in though Newcastle now is really working for them, isn't it? Trippier came in, Botman improved the central defence, then Guimaraes, then Isak. I think Harvey Barnes is a great player. So they just seem to keep getting their signings right, and we know that Eddie Howe doesn't mix and match and rotate too much anyway. So
improve what's there already, hasn't he, as well? Joel Linton, for example.
Yeah, exactly. But it's going to be really interesting next season because I think there are going to be, the same team sort of knocking about up there. Chelsea, they have to get better for me. I think they've got a brilliant manager. Clearly, it's a mess there. They need to.
They've swept up a lot of that mess. In fairness, it's a very young team now.
I don't think they have done that. They have cleaned it up a little bit, but it's still a mess to me. I look at the midfield yesterday, and okay, it's only pre-season, but you got Fernandez, Santos, a 19-year-old, Chukwuemeka. Is he ready? In your sort of central midfield, I'm just not sure that's good enough to get them back to where they want to be. So there are issues there. There's a lot of players there that were relatively young or have been out on loan last season, and you just think that they are lacking a bit. And Kunku's going to be a decent signing, I'm sure of that. But I just feel like Villa, with their sort of real senior squad set now, are in a great place, and I think they could use that to their advantage.
I'm glad you've said that because it completely backs up what I said on Sky this morning. And one of the guys I was working with, a Chelsea fan, was looking at me like I'd just said the worst thing I could possibly say. I just said that at the moment he's not a top 6 side. They've got a top 4 manager, but I don't think it's a top 6 side at the moment. There's a lot of potential there, but that isn't a team I think is going to finish in the top 6. I think if they get Caicedo, that'll improve them because he's a very high level footballer, so good at so many things.
Yeah,
but you're right about Villa. I believe top 5 can get you Champions League football this season as well because of the new format. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that Villa challenge for 5th. I know they've got to manage the European load, and we don't know what kind of factors that's going to have on the squad. But you would say, based on last season, there's a chance of 5th. I would say.
if they can build on the momentum from the back
They've
end of
got
last
momentum, haven't
season
they?
and take that into the season, the first 3 months are really key for Villa, I think, because um, the group stage of the Europa Conference League is going to cause the most sort of upheaval because those are when the fixtures are going to come quite quickly, and then the Carabao Cup quickly comes in, and then the FA Cup after Christmas. So I think if Villa can get a really solid 3-4 months under their belt and be sort of in the top 6-7 at that point, I think they'll have a great chance of kicking on from there because you've then got the January window if you need to maybe do one more player in just to help. Um, you can then sort of pick and choose how important your European games are and whether you need to rest up key players for Premier League games, etc. But I just think those first 3 or 4 months are key because it may be a slightly lazy example, but if you look back at West Ham last season, they struggled quite early on and then around Christmas. And then you got to the back end of the season. And yeah, they had this great European run where they didn't lose in the Europa Conference League, which was excellent, and went on to win it. And fantastic. Look, you look back and it's a really good season for them. Nice memories. But you just didn't want that flirt with relegation. And I just hope Villa don't get dragged in or sucked into any of that.
I really can't see
I
that.
don't think they will. I don't think
can't
they
envision
will.
that at all.
But I just think it's quite important to get off to a decent start, the first couple of months.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between Unai Emery's football and David Moyes' football. But I take your point, West Ham had finished 6th and 7th, I think, before last season. And they just got off to a horrendous start, didn't they, before they'd even played any European football. I think they lost their first couple of games and then managed to sneak a 1-0 at one of the worst games of football I've ever seen at Villa Park. That was a truly awful game that West Ham won. Knew that they would win as well because they hadn't scored a goal all season and they beat Villa 1-0. But I look at we've talked about Newcastle a little bit there. Yeah, bearing in mind the head start we gave them, Villa didn't finish too far away from Newcastle. And I think if you look at the two squads, look at the two managers, look at the fact that both managers have actually improved the players that were already there, I don't think there's a hell of a lot of difference between Villa and Newcastle, squad-wise and quality. And bear in mind as well, we absolutely wiped the floor with them at Villa Park as well, played them off the park, and Newcastle fans were... they gave Villa a lot of credit that day, actually, for how they played. Said they were the best team that they'd faced all season. But I just think if you look at the clubs as a whole, I don't think there's a huge difference between Villa and Newcastle. And most people will have Newcastle up challenging towards the top four.
Yeah, I think so. I think the two clubs have got very similar issues, shall we say? That the fact that they've got to get used to managing European games and a Premier League season for the first time in a very long time.
Yeah, both teams have been without Europe for a long time.
Yeah, and look, the Champions League games for Newcastle are going to probably be more important than Villa's Europa Conference League games. At
Be
least
harder as well.
At least early on. Yeah, and if you've got a Real Madrid or an Inter Milan or a Bayern Munich, on a Wednesday or Tuesday night, does that come into your thinking for the Saturday before or the Saturday after? And all these things over a course of a season add up, and you might see Chelsea and Tottenham even, although I do think Tottenham are going to struggle this year. But you might just see those clubs without European football benefiting slightly later into the season. I mean, it'd probably be good to play Chelsea early and perhaps Liverpool and perhaps Tottenham even. Get those away games out of the way early because come sort of February, March, when they're probably going to be settled, they're going to have a decent sort of team or at least a nucleus of what they know is going to work with a very good manager. Certainly in Pochettino anyway. Wouldn't want to be going there a little bit later in the season when they're fresh and they haven't got the European games. And that's when he's going to catch up on teams. So for Newcastle and Brighton as well, because let's not forget them because they've had a great season as well. And Villa, they're going to have to try and manage that. And that'll be the real making of them. If Villa can get another season in the top 7, I think, then that's a really good season, regardless of what they do in the Europa Conference League. Because I just think the teams that finished below them last year, minus Newcastle, minus Tottenham, are going to be a little bit better.
Yeah, be interesting to see what happens. It's a bit of a trip into the unknown with those teams. It heavily looks like Kane might be going to Bayern. The fact that the delegations come in today into London to meet with Spurs, it feels like that move's probably going to happen now, and that's a huge loss for Spurs. You can't replace his 30 goals a season. He's a one-off, and it's going to
No.
be really difficult for them to move on from Harry Kane, because he's been such a big part of the football club for so long. A little bit like when Villa lost Jack. Actually, you've built your team around that player for so long, and he's been so reliable for so long. I think there may be a bit of suffering to come off the back of that, although I do think they've made a good appointment managerial-wise. I think he will get it right. He just needs a little bit of time. But it's certainly got the makings of an interesting Premier League, and I think Villa are up there in the conversation at the moment as one of the teams to watch out for. I think the momentum, if they do carry it on, which I think they will, I think that's absolutely massive. We mentioned like the European adventure and the Premier League. We haven't talked about the other cups, League Cup and FA Cup, which I'm sure Unai Emery's got an eye on as well. One interesting thing to come out of the tour is that he's pretty much said, I'm not going to buy another goalkeeper. Now, it's been a point of contention amongst the Villa fans. Look, Olsen, not here to absolutely obliterate the guy, but he's looked shaky whenever he's put on the gloves for Villa. Even in the pre-season game, he looked a little bit ropey when he came into the fray. Not really built for building up from the back. You'd assume he's going to get cup games. Are you surprised that Unai Emery's not looking at a goalkeeper as backup that's a little bit more suited to his methods?
Well, I mean, I know Villa have been looking at goalkeepers in the background, so I mean, I wouldn't totally rule it out yet.
Do you think he's just saying it to build his confidence up a little bit?
I mean, possibly, and if that is the case, then fair play. But I know for a fact that Villa have been looking at goalkeepers over the last sort of 6 to 9 months. Which all sort of forward planning clubs do anyway. Forward thinking clubs do anyway, because you always have to look at your next positions and when you're going to have to sign an next player in A, B, or C position or whatever. But they certainly have. They looked at the Georgian goalkeeper at Valencia. I know that for sure. Yeah, good pronunciation, mate. I'm glad you dropped that one.
My goalkeeper in Football Manager, thankfully. So I managed to drop in the right.
It saved me there, Dan.
Don't worry about it anytime.
But with Olsen, yeah, I mean, look, I've obviously spoken to people at the club who have worked with him. Neil Cutler, the previous goalkeeping coach, and his take on Olsen was always that he's the perfect number 2 because he's relatively low maintenance. He knows where he's at. He has got the international experience, so he can come in and do a job when he's asked. And he believed that he was getting better with his feet as well, which is something that
he did play the odd good ball, but then it's always followed up by a mistake 5 minutes later. Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, it's tough. It's difficult because I'm the same. I share the same opinion as most supporters do with Olsen. I haven't been convinced by him. I look at the games that he's played, other than the game against Tottenham, and he's looked shaky. I look back at the Brentford game away, really shaky that day. Newcastle when he came on, shaky. Manchester United in the cup, difficult. Stevenage in the cup, not good. It doesn't stack up nicely for him. And when you're behind Emi Martinez, who's got a massive ego, and
got massive ability,
and massive. Well, yeah, rightly so. He backs it up with his performances, and he doesn't miss many games. It's always going to be difficult for you because you can't get in, you can't get that continuity going, and it's hard, isn't it, to get called upon and just come and be on it. Sort of when you never play
as well, but it's certainly worse for a goalkeeper, I would say.
Difficult, but I mean, it's hard. I think Villa's next move would probably have to be a younger goalkeeper who's willing to play the long game and eventually take Emi Martinez's place or push him a little bit harder. But you just feel that Olsen's never really got the capabilities to push Martinez. You don't ever think that he's going to be better than him.
Do you not think that's common nowadays in the Premier League? If you look at all the top teams, they've got an undisputed number 1. We had this conversation earlier on Sky because of David Raya being linked with Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't too many.
Kelleher. Tom Heaton at the moment for Manchester United. Ortega's never going to come in and be number 1 for Man City. Do you know what I mean? There's an undisputed number 1. So Martinez is Villa's version of that. He's the undisputed number 1. Like I said, I'm not here to pan Olsen, but like you've said, unfortunately, every time he's played, he's looked suspect. And then that when he's playing in front of the Villa crowd gets antsy, which doesn't help him, but then the way he plays doesn't help the Villa crowd. So it all kinds of works in his horrible concoction. But I've got to be honest, I love Big Cuts to bits. I didn't really buy into what he was saying. I've interviewed him the same as you. if it's no good being the perfect number 2 and being all these things, if when you're on the pitch you're shipping goals left, right, and centre, and if you look at the goals conceded column when Olsen has been on the pitch, it isn't pleasant reading, and I don't think it's a coincidence.
It's interesting, isn't it, when Emery was asked about him? I wasn't in the press conference, so I don't know the exact question that was asked, but he brought up the Tottenham game, didn't he? He said that he kept a clean sheet against Tottenham, and clearly he's trying to boost him and build him up, because there will be games for him. I think Martinez isn't going to play every single game. As much as he probably wants to.
Do you not think, though, in Europe, for example, we've worked so hard to qualify for Europe?
I think Martinez will play in Europe.
Do you think it's FA Cup and League Cup?
Yeah. Well, I think it's maybe just League Cup.
You think?
Yeah,
I'm just going.
I don't see why Martinez wouldn't play in the Europa Conference League and the Premier League. There might be times where you give him a rest, but the first 3 games, for example, in Europa Conference League, that Villa will want to go and win all 3, regardless of who they're playing against, if they qualify, of course. I'm sure Martinez will want to play, and I'm sure Emery will want one of his strongest teams there as well, because it's the games later on in the group stage, isn't it, that don't matter too much. Or perhaps if you go and smash a team 4-0 in the first leg of a 2-legged one later down the line,
Yeah, I've got to say, it's probably the only concern I have in this. I'm saying if the season started tomorrow, I'd be happy. I did think they'd get a goalkeeper. I did think they'd bring someone in to not compete, but someone who's just a bit more adept at what Emery wants. We saw Raul Martinez struggled with the distribution from the back when Emery first came in. You're asking Olsen to come in once every 6-7 weeks. Like you said, I don't think it's easy, but I also don't think he's covered himself in glory when he's been on the pitch at all. I expected them to look at an experienced goalkeeper. Someone like, if Tom Heaton had gone down to 3rd choice at Man U, maybe try and get him back, or Alex McCarthy, who's just been relegated with Southampton. I thought they just might get that experienced British, happy to be number 2 head in, but maybe they still will. But Emery might be using the media to boost Olsen. And I've got to say as well, if he is on the pitch, the fans have got to try and just get behind him and give him some self-belief and give him some confidence, because he's not the only goalkeeper I've seen go under at Villa Park. I think of Michael Oakes. He was a great number 2, but then suddenly he had to play every week when Bosnich got a bad injury. And when he was playing in front of the whole end, and I spoke to John Gregory about this, he couldn't cope with it. He'd always keep a clean sheet in the half at the north stand. But when it came to playing in front of the whole end, he'd be rooted to his line. He struggled to deal with things, and he just couldn't do it. We saw Neeland at times as well struggle. So Kalinic as well. You've seen these goalkeepers that have struggled to have followed us around a little bit until we got Martinez, but.
Neeland was an interesting one, because every goalkeeper I spoke to that worked with him said, like, technically and in training, he was the perfect goalkeeper. Neeland. Everyone who worked with him, players, fellow goalkeepers, they all said that he was the perfect goalkeeper in training. Like, he did everything right. I can't go into too much detail because I don't know the exact details. The
goalkeeping terms, distribution was good.
He had everything basically. But then when it came to a game, there were just too many mistakes, weren't there?
But that's kind of what we're saying about Olsen, isn't it? Cuts has bigged him up, saying how good he is in training, good around the place. But like I said,
give me 1 minute, Dan. I'm just moving this curtain across because there's just so much bloody sun in my eyes.
Been like a vampire.
Okay, sorry.
Adam said no edits, so I presume that might stay in, actually, that you've gone and got now. I know you've been struggling with it for a while.
Yeah.
Let's get this
through the glass.
Let's get this guy back. Pepe, what's he doing now?
Jesus, remember that game at Southampton away? Oh my word!
Yeah, he did have a couple.
I actually planned to go. I planned to go to that game writing about Pepe Reina. Sometimes we always go to the game with a
positive piece,
and then in just the last 10 minutes, he was just all over the place, wasn't it?
Yeah, I take it back as a number 2 though. He's very good with it, good with his feet. Pepe Reina still probably got a bit about him as well. My barber gave me that shirt because Pepe Reina. I mean, he hasn't got much hair actually, so I'm not sure what he was doing at the barber. But when he left Villa, he gave all the lads that worked in the barbers, he gave them all a match worn shirt. So my barber knows I collect them, and he gave me it because he said it's just sitting in his house. But he sounded like a top guy by the way, Pepe Reina. A nice little trip down goalkeeper memory lane for us there whilst talking about Olsen. Before we go, Greg, we've covered the America tour pretty well there. I would say I've gone into some detail. I have to ask you about what you're hearing about transfers. Do you think Villa are done?
From what I understand, the focus now is moving players on. That's really key now because
Same
we've
as
heard.
Arsenal and Man U. A lot of parallels there.
Yeah, but look, Villa have got 3 players in on, huge wages and a lot of money spent in transfer fees. So with Diaby and Torres, it's significant investment. They have to move players on now. Players that aren't going to feature. We know that Nakamba's moved and there's a little bit money back for him. Sanson's gone out on loan, so he's off the wage bill.
Talk to me
But
about Wesley to Stoke, Greg.
Wesley to Stoke, another one actually off the wage bill, but nothing really back in terms of
He must have been on
any
a
financial.
fairly hefty wage.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, if you come in for £22 million, you can have a decent salary as well, aren't you? So it's just
But
a
he's not
shame.
getting that at Stoke.
I do feel really, really sorry for Wesley because he had one of the worst injuries, sort of medical staff have ever seen at the club. So it
Specialists
was
came out of retirement,
horrendous.
didn't they, to deal with that injury?
Yeah, it was horrendous, and for a player to sort of come over to England and get your Premier League dream, and it all sort of ends like that so quickly. He's sad, really. Okay, we might look at it and think, well, he's a very, very well paid flop,
I know that's
but
no.
there'll be but his personal pride will be hit there. He wanted to play in the Premier League. He wanted to feature regularly for Villa, but just never, unfortunately, got there. It'd be interesting to see how he does at Stoke.
Yeah, I'm quite interested by it.
Didn't get many goals last year in Segunda, so I think it'd be tough for him. But let's say there are other players as well, aren't there? Your Courtney Horses, your Keenan
I was going to
Davis.
ask you about those two because they're kind of caught up in a bit of no man's land, aren't they? Those two,
Yeah,
they've not
well,
featured for Villa for a long time.
No, well, Hawes had an injury issue, didn't he, at the back end of last season? We wrote about that in depth on the Athletic. So for those who are subscribed, go and have a read of that, and that'll explain his situation. Obviously, Villa will try and get a little bit of money back for each of their players if possible. I don't know if they'll be moving on any of the youngsters for permanent deals. I mean, Finn Azaz is a player that obviously performed really well at Plymouth last year. Quite a few other clubs in the Championship are looking at him. He might get another loan and maybe
Could he not go
build up
back
his
to
value.
Plymouth? They're in the Championship now, aren't they?
Plymouth want to re-sign him, but there are other clubs that are interested. So it's a case of just holding fire. Timo Bunham, another one who had been. Lots of people are asking where is he? He's injured. He missed the US tour. We'll see about what happens in the future, but expecting him to be a part of the Villa team or squad further into the season. Aaron Ramsey, there are so many players that could go out on loan.
Dendoncker.
Dendoncker is a player that if Villa can get a decent transfer fee back for him, they'll take that. They don't want to move players out on loan. They want to get money back in for them. I think if you remember, the reason that Dendoncker was signed is because Steven Gerrard thought that Douglas Luiz was going to Arsenal. He didn't go in the end, so Villa effectively had another midfielder. Dendoncker never really let Villa down. I think he's a decent player. I think the 4 games that he came in towards the back end, Villa didn't lose a game. So,
No.
He plays a part, but have Villa moved on? And, the fact that they got Tielemans in, he's probably better than him. And they've got some of the youngsters coming through, so we'll see.
I think he's a useful squad member. I still rave about him from that Newcastle game at home where he hadn't played for months and just dropped in like he'd been played every week. I think that's
He was excellent, wasn't he?
That's the sign of a really solid, good, reliable squad player. Dendoncker, not the quickest, but always puts himself in the right place. And I think Douglas Luiz had some good games playing next to him. Actually, some of Douglas's best games actually came when he was playing next to Dendoncker. I'd like him to stick around, especially for European games. I think he's a useful option off the bench as well with his height. If you need, if you're trying to see a game out against a physical side, you bring Dendoncker on. That's another body defending set pieces. I'd like him to stay, but as we said last week,
trust
them.
Yeah, of course. It'd be great to have all these players to turn to and just have a really, really strong, 19-man squad, whatever it is. But there is a need to sell a couple of players.
Of course.
They just have to do it.
Man U are doing it, aren't they? I think they don't really want to move McTominay on, but if they get an offer for him, and they'll sell him. Basically, if West Ham pay the money that they want. If not, they're quite happy to keep him, but they'll move him on if a substantial offer comes in. Same with Harry Maguire. They're probably quite happy to keep him around as a 4th centre back, but if they can get relatively high transfer fee back, and not going to get back what they paid for him. Obviously, they'll move him on. I think there's a lot I've realised this week. Last 2 weeks, a lot of clubs are in a similar position of not being, financially really concerned and deep trouble. But if they can move players on who aren't going to feature very much, they'll do it because it makes sense to do. Right, I'm on my doorbell. Good timing.
That was a good time.
Yeah, thanks very much, Greg. Really enjoyed talking to you on 1874, the podcast. Not sure what shows will be coming up, but there will be some content coming soon. So I'm going to go and answer my door, and Greg can protect himself from the sun. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. Subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on. Give us a comment as well, and like the video if you've enjoyed it, or leave a review or a like wherever you are digesting this podcast. Thank you very much. Up the Villa.